All right, guys. So welcome to the One Body, One Life podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Jason Wan, lifestyle physical therapist, and I also specialize in helping people with pain and injuries. I like to teach a lot of things on this podcast, from strength training, mindset, nutrition, anything in between. I like to expand the horizons of like how to help people live healthier, more fulfilling lives. And once in a while, we also bring special guests in to share their expertise and their wisdom. And I'm this guy for a few years now. I think we just met through Instagram. And we have very similar philosophies, and we've passed off like a number of different tips and strategies for each other. And we definitely are supportive of each other and in terms of our goals. And his name's Sean Coleman, Dr. Sean Coleman. Welcome in, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, man.
Awesome. So why don't you just share a little bit about who you are, what you do for a living? And ultimately, it's a weird question, but what's your purpose? What's your kind of take for like why you started your own thing as well?
Yeah, so I'm similar to Dr. J. I'm a sports physical therapist down here in San Diego, California. Recently just started my own cash-based practice here. So similar story, been doing this for almost 10 years now. I would say my current purpose and my current why that I'm doing this is to be able to provide a better form or a better quality care that I knew I could provide, but maybe wasn't quite able to in previous kind of settings. I worked primarily sports orthopedics my entire career, high level professional athletes when I was back in Philly. So my new goal is everyone deserves to train like a professional athlete and to get the quality care of a pro. My mantra here is train like a pro, rehab like a pro. I take those same philosophies, the same style, treatment style, and apply it to the everyday athlete, weekend warriors to competitive runners. So anything you got that's outgrowing your typical PT gym is what I specialize in.
Perfect. Yeah. You could definitely touch on subjects in terms of what good quality physical therapy is versus what tends to be subpar. And honestly, sometimes when it's subpar, it's not necessarily the PT itself. Sometimes it's part of the system as a whole and the terms and conditions that you have to follow by. And we have a really cool topic today. And this is for anybody that's over the age of 30, which I think, Sean, I don't even know your age. I think you're a little younger than me. I'm 35. I just hit my mid 30s. The topic today is called staying fit into your 30s and beyond. And because me and Sean have a wealth of experience with sports and orthopedics and just spanning the gamuts of health, and we take care of ourselves as well, we definitely preach what we teach. We definitely like to enlighten you guys on a little bit. So Sean, quick question. As an athlete over the age of 30, what are just some cornerstone pillars that you focus on to stay healthy as you age? And what do you impart onto your clients as well?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I try and do is still try to stay athletic, and that means moving fast, moving heavy, moving dynamically. So balancing out mobility, stability, and doing it in a way that speaks to me. And for me, it's being athletic. It's we both play basketball. I was like collegiate lacrosse player. I'm a little younger than I'm 34, so
Yeah.
hanging on to my early 30s. But I will say, in keeping with that kind of style and listening to my body, I know I'm not 19 anymore, but I'm the strongest I've been since college. I've been arguably in some things even stronger and I'm training less. So I think we always think more is better, but better is better. I think the biggest thing in training in your 30s and beyond is knowing your passion, knowing what you love to do, knowing what you don't love to don't force things, and then just keeping it balanced and keeping it fun.
For sure. Those are great. Those are great points to hit on. Some of my mantras that I hit on with my clients is training smart, because a lot of times that people think that they're in their 30s and they're just if they want to, they try to go 100%, and it's all about just building as much muscle as you can. But little do people realize that muscle is not actually built in the gym. It's built in the other areas. It's built in the bedroom when you sleep. It's built also in the foods that you eat. And so training smart is like understanding that as you're in your 30s, you can't just lift 4 hours a week. Like back when I was in Davis, it was there's just like two to 3 hours of basketball. Like hours before that, it was like 2 hours of lifting. And so your body can just and you have no obligations. You have no obligations,
Right.
no kids, no full-time job, but you're trying to just living again in your teens. You feel like you're invincible. But at the same time, just understanding training smart. And I think one thing that we both pretty good at is monitoring our clients' kind of progression. I've heard this and I liked it. And I was like, I wonder if I stole it from you once in a while, but it's earn your progressions, right? It's earn
Yeah.
like do you mind kind of ask, what does earning your progressions mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's a huge thing I preach in my practice and to my clients. I think that the thing that people don't understand is that physical therapy isn't done to you. Rehab isn't done to you, it's done with you. And I think
Yeah.
that you put it in the client's hand or the patient's hands. And when they're like, it's day one and it's like, when do you think I can run again? Or when can I shoot some hoops or get back on the track? And there is no timeline. It's when you earn it, right? Here's where you are. Here's where the things that you love to do and what your goal is require you to do. Today, we're learning how to climb stairs. We need to
Right.
think that you give tissue healing and the time to recover is a window. It's a window because if you're checking the boxes off correctly and appropriately, it might be much faster. It might be,
Mhm.
you look at online, it's 6 weeks for a hamstring strain to heal. And it's, but if we're feeding that thing properly and listening to it and being as aggressive as we can, we might be able to push that a little sooner. But you
Right.
have to earn it. You have to be the one to check the box off. It doesn't just
Absolutely.
happen. It's not like week 6 and it's back on the treadmill. It's can you squat? Can you manage load? Can you decelerate? Can you accelerate? All those things are things that we do in our rehab process. And I think when you give that simple answer of like when you earn it, it's like, all right, let's get to work then. That's something I love. And I think my clients take that challenge on too. So it makes it fun.
Yeah, I think when I take your mantra of earning your progressions, I do think about like one of the things I always say is you're 34, I'm 35, but age is truly relative to like how you feel, right? So some people they start to act their age or they see their peers and they're like, okay, my peers are on the couch watching Netflix and they're done with their athletic career versus when you really preach earning your way towards getting stronger, faster, and more resilient as you get older, it truly is. I'm the same way. But you at 34, I probably just even last year, I was lighter than college and I was lifting twice the amount of weight. And the reason why is because again, it's about earning your progression. So as long as you're documenting your own training splits, you're documenting the amount of reps and sets, it's pretty clear that the body is very resilient. You can continue to get stronger and get more powerful as you get older. One thing that I I wanted to ask you is like, how does maybe one I kind of enlighten on it a little bit, but how does one continue to get either stronger, faster as they get older? What was are be some of the approaches that you take?
I think we tend to maybe underdose a little bit as we get older because we're just like, I'm not going to
I
lift
agree with
heavy
that.
because I'm not going to lift heavy because I know it's going to hurt my knees or,
Or it's going to be
um, I,
risky,
yeah. But again, like, why? If you're checking the box, if you've done the accessory work or the unilateral work, or you've done
Mhm.
the isolated stuff, like you've earned the ability to go and do it. Go
Right?
pull from the floor, put something heavy on your back.
Right?
And I think it's also that's something that I know for me. Like like I work in a CrossFit gym, so
Mhm.
there's this feel about CrossFit is it tends to hurt people, and I think that you have to understand like what the stress is going to do to you. No one downstairs is complaining about getting hurt. They're all like, yeah, but I'm also pulling heavy weight and I'm crushing it. Whereas like other people are like, oh, I just went for a slow jog around the block and now I'm getting shin splints. So it's
Mhm.
I think the to answer your question about like how do you get stronger is if you want to do that, you need to know what the programming is supposed to look like to get you stronger. So again, if you've earned the right to continue to progress, I love your kind of notion there of documenting what you're doing. That's key. Like sometimes people go into the knee extension machine, they're like, 70,
Yeah, it's just
it's like,
based on feeling like I'm having a shitty day and I'm just gonna like
right.
hit 20 pounds. I'm gonna have a great day and I'm gonna go all out, and then all of a sudden it leads to an injury.
Yeah, I think that's important too, is like to listen to your body. But if you know that like previously you've done 80, 80, 80, 85, 80, you know that like, all right, it's a bad day. Maybe I won't try 90, but I'm not just gonna go
Right.
to 50. Maybe I'll go
Right.
75, last set, get back to 80. And it's like, all right, I didn't regress today. I think that might sound like a simple thing, but just being able to record your lifts and have a planned progression. Oh, I'm gonna go up 5% next week. And yeah,
Yeah.
know that that's going to maybe tax you a bit. So recover a bit better the next day. So the recording system and that style and knowing when to advance keeps you on that steady, nice, steep incline.
Yeah. Underdosing was a key thing that you said. And I think even in physical therapy practice, if you go to a physical therapist, we've heard this before, the classic 3 sets of 10 and just everything's 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 10. And oftentimes there is no progression, but especially in your own, let's say you're over 30 and in your own kind of health and fitness career, I know more than try 60 to 80% of people do not document their stuff. They don't
Right.
document things. They come in randomly to the gym with no plan. That's why honestly people do hire people like me and Sean to create a program that they can stick to, and they can see they're earning the progression. So from week to week, we're either giving new variables or just teaching them like, hey, how to progress load. Obviously, form and technique is a part of that, but at the same time, just making sure that you have a set plan of attack. Monday, I'm hitting upper body. Tuesday, I'm hitting legs, and you're staying consistent on that route. The more consistent that you can be in the long run, it's clear that even in my own life, just last year, I was hitting like 20-pound pull-ups. And that was hard for me. That was extremely hard. But just sticking to the same exact plan and just documenting everything on a spreadsheet, it went from 20 pounds to like 100 pounds, like pretty quickly. Not saying
Amazing.
everybody can do that, but at the same time, it just shows again that age is relative to how you feel. So if you are in your 30s, just making sure that you're documenting, you can see what you've done 1 month ago, 2 months ago. You can always try to one up yourself given certain circumstances around like sleep and everything. But I truly think that if you don't document your stuff and you're not staying mathematical with everything, then you could be just underdosing the rest of your life. And I'm sure you know this, Sean, but as we get older, age 50, 60, we start to lose relative strength, relative power. We start to lose speed. And so if you know that, then you do want to build up as much strength and mobility and power output in your younger years. So when you are in your 60s and 70s, you have you don't have to like steep decline. You can decline a little bit more steadily.
Yeah.
Hopefully that makes sense to people.
Yeah. I think I think we're trying to normalize aging, right? We're trying to
Yeah.
be like, hey, it's okay. These are things that are fine, but I think it's also important to address the elephant in the room. We are degrading a little bit. Let's not get it twisted, right?
Yeah.
Things aren't going to get better. Like you said, I think it's a slow leak. So
Mm-hmm.
get a bigger bucket, fill it up to the top in your 50s, 60s, 70s. Like I'm not going to be doing what I'm doing right now. Like you said,
Right.
you've got 2 kids, newborn. Congratulations, by the way. So like I have married, no kids. So like our
Mm-hmm.
obligations and even our family and our household are very different. So
Right.
I know in 10 years, my fitness goals are going to change.
Yep.
But my goal right now is I'm stacking wins, I'm stacking gains so that I can maintain as best I can through the aging process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's switch gears to even just priorities. Priorities is we hear the classic thing of like when we're in our 30s, a lot of people in their 30s, they are in like, they're either in more pain or they are dealing with some sort of injury that doesn't heal. And obviously we're always saying, hey, like we have social media stuff, but let's be clear. It's much easier to work with us directly. Now, as in some ways, I was talking about priorities. What do you say to somebody that has, and maybe they don't have a family, but let's say they're just always, I'm very busy, full-time job. They're more focused on money versus focusing on their health. And so how do you coach people towards prioritizing, saying, hey, if you maybe you don't have time, but maybe you can try to make time for things. And I was curious on just like prioritizing, you prioritize your health more than half the people I know on Instagram. And I was just curious about priorities. Do you preach that yourself and do you preach that to your clients?
100%. Yeah, I think probably one of the bigger things that I get is especially in people our age, is this huge shift. You have newborns, you have young kids. I specialize in working with people in their 20s to mid to late 30s, even though they might be not college age. They're starting new families. I think their life priorities change. You have this overall shift away from yourself. It's now someone else is more important than me for sure. So I think emphasizing to young parents that like you taking the time to be like, how can I fit me into my day and my health, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, like
Mm-hmm.
it isn't selfish, right? Like it's one of the most selfless things you can do is take care of you so that
Yep.
you can branch out and you can give to your family. Like
Yeah.
I keep using the bucket, but you can't give from an empty bucket either. So
No, I
like,
I agree. Like when,
if you want
especially
to
when you
give more, yeah, if you want
talk
to
about
give more, if you want
capacity,
to give more,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? The capacity, your bucket is the same thing when I say about like capacity. Like I know plenty of moms that, let's say postpartum, and let's say like their capacity for doing things before something hurts, it's like they're an 8-ounce glass. But a lot of times they're running on empty because they're giving all their energy, their resources, their everything to their kids and to keep the house afloat. But at the same time, if you think about what Sean said, which is like self-care is not selfish. So if that person is really prioritizing strength training and giving themselves even just 15 to 20 minutes versus giving themselves zero, is that over time they build muscular tissue, they build strength in these areas. And so instead of being this 8-ounce glass and you're always running on empty, maybe you could become a 12 to 16-ounce glass where you have a higher capacity for doing things. And at the same time, your body's not hurting every single day. You're not feeling your age, but you're starting to feel like more like your normal self. And again, we're not in our teens anymore. But again, giving yourself that time back to yourself, I think is really pivotal for people in their 30s and even and beyond. So yeah, I don't know if you have any takes on that. And as far as like your priorities, like in your current training, I'm just curious, like, how do you train? Like, you're 34, you're still pretty damn athletic. I see you still making gains in the gym. What do you specifically do in terms of like your current training and how you're trying to reverse that aging process or maintain a level of fitness that you're comfortable with?
Yeah, I think like going back to when I was in college, I found a passion for a little bit more of like Olympic lifting style movements, some powerlifting or even just like cleans and jerks and things that get you moving fast.
Yep.
You move a heavy weight really fast, you feel like a badass.
Sure.
I think that's just great. So that's been my new shift. I'd say in the last 2 years, I switched over to more like functional style fitness, more
Hmm.
CrossFit adjacent. So just like heavy hit workouts. So that would probably be my thing, and more so than the programming as it is the community. I think
Yeah.
that's not just me saying, it's research shows that if you have a specific program that's built around you and your goals and
Hmm.
a community, you have friends, you've got people there that you communicate with and you're high-fiving, whatever it is, to
Yeah.
be a part of a team, the adherence rate to exercise over a 6 month span goes from like a 40% retention rate to 7.
Hmm.
It's insane. Just off of, instead of going to, oh, I heard that this yoga class is good and this hit workout's good, I'm going to go and do a 6 months trial. No, if you go and you're like, my 3 friends go here and I like how
Hmm.
they look and what they do, just that alone gives you a way higher adherence rate over a 6 month span. That's important. I think people don't, underestimate the quality of still having cheerleaders and being a cheerleader is very important.
I think so, yeah. And I'm glad that we're talking about this because I wanted to throw out this question because your training split is going to look a little bit different from mine. And especially just given circumstances. A community setting, I'm totally in agreement with that. The amount of retention and compliance to your own program skyrockets when you're in a community setting. That's why I have at least like an online community setting. And I know that for you, I think you have more time and more, I guess, resources right now towards dedicating that. I personally said to myself, I was in preparation for my newborn. I knew she was going to be here. She's 4 weeks old now. And I know that I don't have the 2 hours of time that I usually can go to 24-hour fitness and just bang out a ton of weights. So I personally invested in my home gym, which now, if the baby's crying, I can go downstairs. I have a monitor. So like just in case she wakes up, I can just climb right back upstairs. So I think it's just good that we're both in our 30s, but we both have our own philosophies around how to stay healthy. So if
Mhm.
you're more like Sean, I definitely agree. Like being in a community setting, finding a community that you feel like you're a part of something that people can like cheer you on. I think that's fantastic. And usually I see people hitting way more PRs usually in a community setting like that versus like on their own. And I think we can agree with that. If you're more like me, where you have a newborn, you have priorities, and your son's going to preschool, I think even just having an all or some mentality, just like once in a while, I stop working. I'm going to be off this call with Sean right now. I'm going to go straight outside, go to the gym, probably, or not to the gym, go on the hills, probably do a couple hill sprints, get back into the house, right? In any way that I can retain power and strength as I get older, because those things dwindle after the age of 30, and they dwindle even faster if you don't have like a training split that you can be compliant with.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
agree. I think it's tough. I'm coming though. I'm on my way to what you're doing. So I think it's important to see both ends of it though, right? Because we're both similar age. I think that I feel like sometimes it's hard for me to connect with my clients who have kids because I'm
yeah,
sure they hear me talking. You're like, yeah, you wait. Okay. So
they
I
say
think,
that to me all the time before I have kids. Trust me.
right? So I think one thing I do preach though is if you're not doing the community-based workout, you're not doing an hour in the gym and you're not quite doing the 45-minute in-home workout. I think the big thing I also preach is just get a win, like all or some.
Mm,
Even if it's just get a consistent 5-minute core workout. Just stack those wins. And I
mhm.
think you'll be surprised at how much you're like, let me change that into a 10-minute core workout. Let me add some
Yeah.
hip mobility. Maybe I'll go buy some dumbbells and do
Mhm.
a little hit workout. So I think there's definitely these ends of the spectrum, and like you're always able to fit wherever you are.
Exactly. What do you think about like the terms? I've been saying this for a while to my clients. Sometimes if you're a busy professional, busy parent, or whatever it is, people in their 30s, they're flat out busy. I don't think there's many people in their 30s to say, I have all the time in the world. Most people, they're gunning in their career. So they're always like time strapped. So what do you say do you agree with this statement when you say like, hey, instead of fitting in an exercise, you prioritize it, right? Because to me, fitting it in is more like, yes, fitting it in is better than fitting nothing in. But at the same time, fitting it in means that exercise was lower on the totem pole as far as priorities, and you're just fitting it in versus, okay, at 9 a.m., I'm going to do XYZ for my health. I'm just curious on your thoughts on that phrase or that proverb right there.
Yeah, I think that takes effort. It's hard, right? Like I think you're spot on. I think that's something like you have to look in the mirror and realize, yeah, you're right. It's if you're trying to fit it in, you're already trying to fit life in. But if you make time for it, I think that's probably better. So I agree. I think you gotta and it can be something that where you just wake up 5 minutes earlier, or it's whatever it is, you gotta cut a toxic vice out of your life to make it there. And I think
Yep.
that's like that you have to be consistent, right? We're in this for the long haul, and you
Hmm.
have to, and in order to do that, is be accountable. You have to,
Absolutely.
do it. No one's going to do it for you. That's a tough realization for maybe a young parent or someone who's got a lot on their plate, but that's what you want. You want
Yeah.
to start adding in things that are going to make you better and I think you'll find that when you start prioritizing them, the things that are dragging you down that you're like, maybe I didn't need that, you know, 3 episodes of Suits that I watched last night. I could have maybe done the one and then done a workout, right?
Yeah.
There is space everywhere. And I think that if you don't try to fit it around your current life, you prioritize, I think you start cutting out toxicity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've been there's this podcast by Pat Flynn. He was like Smart Passive Income. I listened to a bunch of podcasts, and one thing that he said is if you want to actually make your goals with certainty, or if you want to stop procrastinating, you want to stop just doing what I always say the standard American 30-year-old does, which is like Netflix shows, binge on Netflix, or just eat a bunch of junk. They say, hey, imagine if like your whole life was almost like the Truman Show. If somebody's like a paparazzi and they're
Yeah.
constantly following you, that kind of hit home with me. I don't know if that hits home with anybody here, like in the audience, but when I heard that, I was like, when I'm scrolling social media and I'm scrolling past like Sean Coleman's Instagram, like this is great stuff. And then maybe I scroll through something else that I'm interested in. But it's like, man, if a paparazzi would look at me, would they be judging me? Would they be looking at me in certain ways? So I'm like, hey, stop what you're doing. Get off Instagram, get off your butt, start moving, start running. Because I think that if a paparazzi was following you, you would follow suit with showing some sort of a positive influence on the crowd that's watching you. That's just
Yeah.
something that kind of hit home with me.
I like that. I'm trying to use that.
Yeah,
next
yeah,
time,
yeah, yeah.
next time I'm scrolling for too long, just maybe
Exactly.
someone's watching. Let's get productive here.
Exactly. Let's hit on a couple more subjects, and I want to make sure that people get a lot of value from the podcast. Mobility is something that we didn't hit on. We hit on strength, mindset, priorities. We hit on just so many different subjects. I hope everybody over the age of 30 can take home. What's your take? What's your definition of mobility, and how do you incorporate that, and how do you preach that to your clients?
Yeah, I'd say mobility has like kind of a loose definition depending on who you're talking to. I think
Mhm.
for me, mobility would be you being able to consistently and comfortably access your full range of motion in whatever joint we're talking about. I don't think that there's any normal version of whatever that is. I think that if you stop using that mobility and you stop accessing end range stability, the joint, the soft tissue, they start to suffer. I think sometimes that might be not doing a certain stretch. That might not be great for you, or a certain exercise. So I think knowing your constraints, knowing what you're up against, and steadily and consistently accessing that end range is important for the joint health.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think mobility for me is like being strong and stable within that range of motion. So, like Sean said, it's having access to it. So, for example, I think that if I can reach through Sean's kind of Zoom call, like I can bring his shoulder into a certain range of motion and he could just be dead weight and he'll have roughly this amount of passive range of motion. So, that's why I like to say to people like, strengthening and like active, more dynamic mobility is more superior than just somebody just stretching their hamstrings, because it's more passive. You don't necessarily have access to that range, because if I just bring your shoulder into that range, can you actually hold your shoulder in that range of motion? So when he says end range, is basically being able to contract and be stable within that range of motion. Because if you don't do that, if you don't preach more end range stability, then realistically, then your joints do start to suffer. That's where it leads them, predisposes you to arthritis. So again, it's not just about stretching, but mobility is actually like being strong within that range of motion. And I think that's pretty key. Now, in your own life, I guess you in your 30s, or how you preach that, how do you tell your clients to incorporate more mobility into their day, especially again, if they're people that are time strapped, short on time? And what would you say to that person?
Yeah, I think even just when you're looking at as a physical therapist, like mobility gains or mobility improvements from someone who is a little stiff, for lack of a better word, you need reps. It's not, you can't dose it like you do a strength exercise where it's like this percent of your 1 rep max for this many reps at this much rest break. Like your joint needs consistent fluidity and accessibility. I usually like to use the term a movement snack.
Yeah.
So,
I know.
so a movement snack would be just like if you're a snack, it's something that you just walking over to the fridge and you just pick at something. It's not a meal. You didn't
Yep.
set time up to do it, but that's how I preach mobility is if
Hmm.
you're being able to access that end range shoulder flexion, just up against a doorway, just a couple seconds here and there, just to keep the joint happy and healthy. Now, if you're working on something, you might need a steady regimen, but I think when people start, you turn the coffee on and throw a calf stretch in there, or you're waiting for the pasta to boil and you're leaning up against the countertop, stretching your back out. So I think that there is time, like you said, in the day that you can prioritize these things. And
Hmm.
that's a fun way that I like to just, all things being equal, you're not dealing with anything nasty, keep your joints moving in that capacity.
Yeah, I call them either like habit sandwiches or like unplanned bundles. Like you might not have up like a planned strength training where like you're going to the gym, you're gonna be there for an hour. Like these unplanned bundles where the microwave's going off, you have 60 seconds. What can you do within the 60 seconds?
Yeah.
It's really funny because I think a couple years back, you had a post where you're in your kitchen and I think the coffee was going off, and then you were doing like the thoracic, and I was like, bro, I resonate with this guy because this is exactly what I do like I just did that this morning. Coffee was going off, micro was going 60 seconds. I'm like, thoracic mobility, stretch out my hips, get in some squats, get in some hip internal rotation. I'm like, keep all my joints
Yeah.
healthy. And I was like, this is the kind of people that I like to surround myself with. It's like that exact post. I was like, I wish I did that post earlier, but that's exactly what I do every single day, you know?
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think a key point I think to touch on too is we don't access we're talking about end range stability and end range mobility. Like you don't access those in your everyday life. So very rarely am I taking my shoulder into 170 to 190 degrees of flexion, right? Like
Hmm.
very rarely accessing 45, 50 degrees of hip external rotation. Like
Hmm.
your everyday life keeps you like at a baseline, but these joints need targeted, effortful, purposeful motions, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's just a key point to think about. It's like, all right, I go for my walks or I climb some stairs. That's the bare minimum. You know what I mean? You need to give these joints what they want, and they need a bit more than that.
Yeah, I think that if you consider like strengthening is more global, I think that mobility can be perceived as like more targeted, as in, okay, if I know that I have some hip stiffness, just because you only in access in normal life, like going up the stairs, really only 30, 40 degrees of hip flexion really needed. But if you think about, okay, if my hip is stiff or, staying ahead of the game, I want to access as much range. So the average hip is at least 110 to 130 degrees of hip flexion. And research shows that if you start to lose hip flexion and hip internal rotation, that predisposes you to hip osteoarthritis and potentially future hip replacements. I think I agree with Sean that even though you don't use that range of motion, it's still you need to target like that hip needs a targeted like 2-minute workout. Your elbows, your shoulders, your neck needs sometimes a targeted workout. And when it comes to mobility, to preserve that allows again the person at the age of 30 to live a healthier, more flexible, more resilient life with less pain. One thing that I do definitely want to hit on is frequency. I do preach to my clients, especially like movement stacks. I'm sure you tell your clients like eat as many snacks as you want within the capacity that it doesn't hurt. But for me, frequency is you look at some people at the age of 30, they go, oh, I have my morning ritual, I have my nighttime ritual, and that's cool. But at the same time, you do 5 minutes in the morning, you do 5-10 minutes at night. So that's a total of 10-15 minutes, but you sit on your ass for 8 to 10 hours a day. I'm like, what do you like a seesaw? What do you think's gonna win? So like
Yeah.
when they hear that, oh, that makes sense. I thought my bare minimum was enough. And I was like, no. So like I said, when the microwave is going off, when you end a Zoom meeting, when after a few emails, get a movement snack in, get something in, especially if you have a stiff upper back. Okay, dose enough upper back flexibility exercises to the point where your body feels amazing at the end of the day rather than feeling like it's like getting kind of crunched in. So frequency, I don't know if that's something that you preach, but I'm sure movement stacks and frequency, these are all just different terminologies that we kind of throw out to people.
Yeah, exactly. That's the main thing. Is it needs the reps. It needs the consistency. So yeah, like you said, like your like Monday recovery day being like your 10-minute stretch out. Like that ain't it. Right. So it needs you need to keep it snacking and keep it moving. So yeah, I agree. It just whatever you can do to continuously, repetitively access those motions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like we can go on for days just because our philosophies are very similar. And I want to be mindful of people's times, but at the same time, I don't know if there's other things that we haven't tapped into that you would really like to emphasize. Again, the title of this is being fit and being like aging gracefully into your 30s and beyond. So is there anything that we haven't hit on that you'd be like, hey, this is something I think people would want access to or want more knowledge about?
I think a bunch of things, but I'd say
Too
like,
many, but
yeah, too many. Emphasizing your accessory work. I always preach a lot of single leg stuff, a lot of balance. Like
Mhm.
that's, I would say for someone in their early 30s, I don't really care about balance. I'm not 70, but
Yep.
the proprioceptive and the neuromuscular aspect of training and aging is huge. And even my athletes are like, when they start tapping into the foot intrinsic and their foot to hip kind of connection in a single leg
Yeah.
RDL or a step up, something that's very unilateral, they're just like, I feel like a monster when I go to
Mhm.
push in a two-legged lift. You've got no access to something. You're in the house gym with a gallon of milk. You can get creative. I've gotten people strong doing lots of weird stuff, but I
Yeah.
would say like the single leg, the unilateral work that might seem monotonous and rehabby has huge implications for your continued aging process and your continued athleticism in staying into your 30s and 40s and 50s. So that'd probably be the one thing that people don't think about a whole lot is just
Yeah.
being on one foot.
I think so too. I think that single leg, like I do something where every time I brush my teeth, my wife knows like I hit 10 to 12 single leg squats on each leg damn near every single day. I don't think I've missed a day in over 5 years where I'm just consistently single leg squatting. But I agree that the accessory work, at the same time, I think that sometimes accessory work are easier to kill in terms of convenience because sometimes we need access to barbells or dumbbells. But the thing is watching an NBA or watching the football games is what can you do during those commercial breaks? You don't have access to maybe like a squat and clean or a clean and jerk, but you do have access to working on your foot intrinsics while you're sitting on the couch, or you can do like a side
Yeah.
plank or something. There's just so many things like these little movement snacks. Like I said, like movement snacks. I love that terminology. You can get in these accessory works and you have greater access and more convenience towards doing so. So as you're getting older, again, your priorities might shift. You might not always be able to go to the gym, but at the same time, you can still keep some of these joints, some of these muscles healthy via doing your accessory work. So that's a huge point right there. I don't know. I think that the last thing that I usually love to hit on is more so just understanding like what your why is and like what your purpose is. So I think there's four cornerstones in life. I think there's health, wealth, relationships, and I think there's purpose. So a lot of times we don't prioritize our health because nothing's going wrong right now. We only do things when shit breaks down, and then you're calling up Sean Coleman. You're like, hey, my ankle's messed up, my Achilles messed up. Being proactive, I think, probably is one of the last things I want to hit on is and sometimes it's hard to be proactive because nothing's going wrong. There's no pain. But what would you say to somebody that like, hey, they're in their 30s, maybe nothing's going wrong, but they're interested in taking care of their health? That sense of being proactive versus reactive. What's your take on that?
I think the one thing that people, I think it's part of our system too, which is why I do what I do now. We're a little retroactive. So that's
Yeah.
not anyone's fault. It's just the way the wheel has been turning. I like to think that myself and Jay are breaking the wheel and we're increasing accessibility. Imagine if you just hurt yourself and you're like, oh, I don't quite know. Do I go to urgent care, call my orthopedist? You can call one of us. Like we're educated and trained to be the first point of contact in the
Hmm.
musculoskeletal system injury. I think like you have outlets that are available in 2023 that weren't available when I was beginning my career in 2015. So
Hmm.
we're in like a really trying time in the healthcare system, but it's also like never been more accessible. I'm not saying that I'm the end all be all. I know Jay is really good at what he does. I trust him for sure. So I think the biggest thing is you have outlets and you have accessibility. And I think finding someone you trust, obviously, I think is key. But we offer phone consultations and video chats and all these things that are way easier than taking a day off and going to your doctor. And let us be the ones that coordinate that plan of care. PTs are here to help lighten the burden of the healthcare system right now. So if we can send you to urgent care with a specific complaint and game plan, then that's what I'm going to do. But if I
Hmm.
can be like, hey, do not do that, do these three things and then let me know how it feels. Better? Okay, let's keep this thing going. I'd say that's the huge part of why I like to do this is because we need to really upset this system and
Yeah.
change up a bit. I think being accessible is key for this current climate.
I'm 100% in agreement with that. I think till this day, when people have some sort of sciatica or anything, they immediately panic. They go to their PCP or they go to emergency care. And I truly think that people should be educated and understanding that me and Sean, we are specifically educated in the musculoskeletal and the nervous system route. If you have anything in terms of joint pain or an injury, you don't need to go to your PCP first. Not to say some of them are just going to give out pain medication, but I think that if you come to us directly, especially because people have direct access to us, this is all we preach all day. It's just this specific system that we're really good at. So if you have a muscle, nerve, ligament, joint injury, you probably may want to come to us. And especially for people in the 30s, that I think that another thing that I'm trying to push for and trying to break through this healthcare system is being more preventative. So just because you don't have an injury or you don't have anything, if you're in your 30s and you want to take care of this pillar, which we call health, you can still come to us. Like, we can probably specifically teach you things to prevent or even decrease the chances of injury, to make your body stronger, more resilient, and have greater capacity and reserve so that you can age more gracefully. So you don't have to necessarily wait for something like some shit to break down. You can definitely come to us for consultations, preventative care. And I think that, again, being fit into your 30s, that's something that we're really good at and we want to continue to preach. Yeah. With that being said, Sean, is there anything that you want to end with? Obviously, earner progressions, I'm going to continue to preach that for you. But I don't know if there's anything else you want to tell our crowd for a minute.
Yeah, I think I think that was a really nice segue to our end, was like just the fact that you don't have to wait for dysfunction to reach out to a healthcare professional. And that we are the active solution people. So if you're not just looking for a pain med and a splint, that's what we do. Not waiting, being more preventative. If we don't have to push an inflammatory process along and then start correcting, your time back to 100% is exponentially decreased. I think like waiting until you're trashed to go see somebody, totally fine. Like, I'm here for it. But I'm also here for the minor stuff that, like, you just got a couple energy leaks in the system and you need to address X, Y, and Z, and stay in the gym, keep squatting, keep doing this. Right. I think that's when we can keep you moving, is when you're not totally dysfunctional. Yeah, I think we're here, we're accessible, and it's not just about injury rehab as much as it is just keeping you healthy and happy.
Yeah. Analogy would be like, why start behind a starting line when you could start your foot directly on the starting line, right? Because you start behind the starting line, it's going to take you a lot longer to get back to just square zero. And obviously earning your progression is going to be that much harder.
Exactly.
So,
yep.
In any case, Sean, this was awesome. I feel like we could definitely, if people get value from this, definitely would love to have you on again, and just to share your wisdom, your expertise. For those that don't know you, that want to learn more about you, your services, where would be the best place to find you?
Yeah, I'm located in Mission Valley in San Diego. So that would be like my in-office practice. It's in a CrossFit gym. Pretty much every little piece of equipment that I could ever imagine is here. It's great. So it's a gym called Outlier CrossFit. But I also do online virtual consultations as well, online programming. So you can follow me at Coleman PT Performance on Instagram. And that's where I do a lot of my communicating, keep it super casual. It's me, not a virtual assistant or anything. It's, if you want to reach out and you want to chat in a bit more of an informal capacity, that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, awesome. And then your Instagram. I don't want to butcher this one, but what's your Instagram again?
Coleman PT _performance.
There you go. Awesome, Sean. Definitely, I appreciate your expertise and your wisdom. This was a really fun episode, and I hope that a lot of people, even if you're not in your 30s, if you're like in your 20s and you're listening to this, again, we're talking about preventative care. So make sure you take some of this into account. Don't just listen to this. Make sure you definitely implement some of the knowledge and teachings that we just imparted onto you guys. With that being said, Sean, it's been a thrill having you on this podcast, on the One Body, One Life podcast. I'm all about, our philosophies are very much the same. So we look forward to having you on again, and we'll speak soon.
Yeah, thanks, man. It was a lot of fun.